Welcome to the Enneagram in a Movie podcast, part of the Awareness to Action podcast network. I'm TJ Dawe, and this season my co-host Mario Sikora and I will be exploring the Enneagram through the lens of specific directors whose work demonstrates themes related to the 9 Enneagram types and 3 instinctual biases. If you like what you hear, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. In the meantime, make some popcorn, sit back, and enjoy the show.
All right, hello everybody. Welcome back to the Enneagram Movie Podcast, Season 2, The Directors. I'm Mario Sikora. We're going to be talking about director Spike Lee and Enneagram Type One today. And we're joined by a special host. But first of all, I have TJ Dawe with me as always. How you doing today, TJ?
Very good, thanks. Back in Vancouver, so I should have a clearer signal than I did when I was in the mountains.
All right. And we are joined today by Enneagram teacher Milton Stewart. Before I introduce you, Milton, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Excited to be here.
Great. It's great to have you, and thanks for joining us. So Milton Stewart is an Enneagram facilitator, coach, and consultant, the founder of Kaizen Careers, Coaching and Consulting. Recently became part of the International Enneagram Association Board of Directors. He is the host of Do It for the Gram, an Enneagram podcast. He uses his Enneagram knowledge to help others reclaim their humanity and use the Enneagram in practical ways. He facilitates for co-starters, an organization that helps entrepreneurs turn ideas into businesses. When his day is not filled with work and his various ventures, he is working to achieve educational equity with Stand for Children and mentoring youth. So thanks for being here, Milton. Milton, where can people find out more about you? You have a website or something we can direct people to?
Yes, people can go to kaizencareers.com. I'm also on Instagram at Do It for the Gram Podcast or Kaizen Careers. So those are 2 places you can really reach me. And from there, we can talk, discuss, whatever,
Great, thanks. So we are going to be talking about Spike Lee today. And I have to tell you, rewatching these 4 movies, the movies we're going to talk about are Do the Right Thing, Malcolm X from 1992, Do the Right Thing was 1989, Get on the Bus from 1996, and Inside Man, which was, I don't have it in my notes here, 2006, thank you. Tell you something, I've always been a huge Spike Lee fan, right? Ever since I first saw Do the Right Thing. And once again, I saw this in the theaters in 1989. That's one thing about being old, is that you get to see all these movies that we talk about when they're actually in the theater, and just remember being mesmerized by Do the Right Thing. And I've seen it a bunch of times. The 4 movies that we chose are all movies that I just love and have seen multiple times each. And watching them again this time, I was really impressed with his ability to span genres. Right? I mean, because, we take a look at these movies. Malcolm X is as good a biopic as any that exists. Okay. Do the Right Thing is a creative, innovative, bracing movie, right? It's a true cri de coeur, right? I mean, just this scream from the heart. Get on the Bus almost feels like a documentary to me, right? And it was released within a year of the Million Man March, right? Which it is about. So it was made really quickly on a really low budget. And then Inside Man is just something completely different. Right? I mean, it's a caper movie. It was originally supposed to be directed by Ron Howard, who's a very conventional, very gifted, but very conventional movie theater. And it almost felt to me like Spike Lee was just kind of showing off with that movie, saying, you know what, man, I can take this basic Ron Howard kind of movie and do it better than anybody as well, right? So let me ask you guys, and I'll tell you what, I'm going to ask Milton first. Tell me about Spike Lee, your reaction to him and his films.
Ooh, I have a plethora of notes. What's so interesting too, talking about you watch Do the Right Thing in theaters. That was the year I was born. But anyway, so it is so captivating to watch like all of his movies because they have such an interesting purpose to them, and it's an artistic flow of infusing like very purposeful content to the viewer. And so I love it. It's like to the smallest details, to like the beginnings of how he starts the movie to the very end of how he ends them specifically to make sure a message is given. I love it. But it also it like pulls you in. But then there's also a point where like there's a part in my stomach. It's like, oh, okay, now we're getting that's real. That's deep. Ooh. So it's just interesting balance that I guess I feel from like watching his movies.
Yeah.
So I definitely appreciate him as a director. I definitely do. It's mesmerizing, I guess. I don't know. I can't use really words to describe it all.
Yeah. He's a very visceral director, right? And he's certainly not for everybody, right? I mean, not everybody's a big fan of Spike Lee's. And in his personal life, he's also, fairly polarizing, okay? And outspoken. And the word that always comes to my mind or the phrase that always comes to my mind when I think about Spike Lee is Old Testament prophet, right? I mean, just somebody with a message. I mean, I can hear Spike, I can envision Spike Lee standing on a hill, holding a staff and preaching fire and brimstone, right? I mean, and he's out to make a point and he's out to have an impact on it.
Yeah, I'm just amused at the notion, kind of enchanted by the notion of there being the book of Spike in the Old Testament. So yeah, Do the Right Thing came out when I was in my mid-teens. And by that point in my life, I had autonomy and I had money and I was a huge movie lover. And what I remember in particular about the summer of '89, and that movie came out right in the summer. So the season of summer movies, that was the summer of sequels. People bellyache a lot about how these days movies are dominated by Marvel and Star Wars and franchises in general. So was the summer of 1989. There was Batman, there was Lethal Weapon 2, there was Ghostbusters 2, there was Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Star Trek 5, like License to Kill, a James Bond movie that didn't end up doing so well. Anyway, that's the context of like Do the Right Thing came out in the middle of that and kind of went off like a bomb. And I don't mean that like a box office bomb because it did very well, particularly for an independent movie that didn't have any major movie stars in it. But I was watching Entertainment Tonight a lot in those years, and that movie came up a lot, which is really remarkable given what a hype show Entertainment Tonight is. This was a movie that dealt with actual issues in a real way. It didn't sugarcoat anything. And that he was also part of what I didn't quite realize at the time, but as a movie lover, particularly in the decades since, have really come to appreciate, he was part of the explosion of independent cinema. So he was making movies his own way. He had Final Cut, and I believe he still does, which is practically unheard of in Hollywood. He was making the movies he wanted to make and not just, whatever Hollywood would let him make. And, we'll get to this when we talk about Inside Man, but a movie like that he didn't write, that was originally slated to be directed by somebody else, he inserted his own ideas in a number of key places. So his fingerprints are on everything that he does. And if we look at the landscape, the media landscape now, it is far from perfect in terms of diversity and equity, but it's way better than it was.
Yeah.
And I think he deserves a lot of the credit for that.
Yeah, agreed. I'll say one more thing, because you guys are younger than me, and Milton was only being born in 1989. It was a really rough year for race relations in the United States, or a really rough time. There's a reference throughout Do the Right Thing to Howard Beach. And don't know if you guys know what the Howard Beach incident was, but it was where a young black man was killed by a group of white men outside of a pizza parlor. And so Radio Raheem is loosely based on Michael Griffith, I believe the name was. And then when one of the people who was, I think it was Griffith, he was fleeing and he got hit by a car. And I hope I'm not conflating events here at the time, but I believe he was hit by a Hasidic Jewish man, which brought another racial, ethnic element into the mix. And it was just, this was the era pre-Clinton, or just right pre-Clinton, where people were starting to talk about super predators and the crack epidemic and all these things. So it was a really, really volatile time. And I was watching this movie with my 11-year-old son last year. He's 12 now. He was 11 at the time. And this was in the aftermath of the George Floyd incident. And at the end of the movie, my son turns to me and he says, "This is what's happening today." Right? And it just broke my heart that 31 years later, a movie is being made in which my 11-year-old son cannot tell the difference, right? Between, I mean, obviously he knew it was an older movie, but I want to say on the one hand that we've come far, and there's still so much further to go on these issues, right? And so it's to people like Spike Lee, I think, that we owe a great debt of bringing these things. And as a white man, it feels to me like you're being confronted with something that is inescapable when you watch a Spike Lee movie, right? It's just, you can't turn away and consider yourself to be a decent human being, I think, right? So I think Spike Lee will be remembered as one of the most important filmmakers in history, quite frankly, for us, right? Okay, so we are working on the assumption that at least Spike Lee's movies represent the theme of the Enneagram Type One. And but let's define what we mean by that. TJ, I'm going to ask you to describe what the Enneagram Type 1 is, and then Milton, I'll ask you to add your thoughts after TJ.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Type 1 is variously called the idealist, the perfectionist, the crusader, striving to feel perfect in the awareness to action model. So ones are idealistic and outspoken. They have really high standards for the world and equally, if not higher standards for themselves. They want things to be right, but that's not in an absolute sense. To them, it feels absolute, but what right means depends on the particular one we're talking about. So you're going to find ones in any field. Stereotypically, the stereotypical image of the one is that you might find them in fields like religion or politics, social justice movements. But you can find ones in law, in science, in education, in music, in any branch of the arts whatsoever, in how households should be run, in crime. There was a one who spoke up in the Enneagram Prison Project about his experiences. He was a meth addict, and he described how he would try and improve the way his fellow meth addicts shot crystal meth. He would say to them, "We may be meth heads, but that doesn't mean we have to be tweakers." So you can find ones in any environment whatsoever. Ones have a sense of being tuned into a higher truth, which feels to them absolute. They have a really harsh inner critic monitoring everything they do, say, and think. The maladaptive one becomes more unbending. They can become prone to black and white thinking. They can be really judgmental. This might show up in terms of scolding, nitpicking, lecturing, and never being satisfied. There can be a lot of repression. Because there's certain things that I'm not supposed to think because I want to be right, much less do. But of course, repressing things doesn't make them go away. It makes them come out sideways. And the more unhealthy and stressed a one is, the more they're prone to justifying their own exceptions to their own rules and justifying their cruel treatment of others in the name of what's right. And they can become so strident and harsh and unpleasant that they alienate people on their own side, even people who completely agree with them. The more healthy, the more adaptive one has these same high standards, but understands that every situation is unique. So a healthy one is compassionate, present. In the word of Russ Hudson, they're like a divine medic. They're funny. They're able to laugh at themselves. They're joyful. They're able to take time to refresh themselves that they need, and they can recharge themselves in genuinely healthful ways. A healthy one has a lot of dignity, and they can remind others of their own inherent dignity. A one at their best is genuinely inspiring. They're leaders that people would follow to the ends of the earth.
That was pretty spot on.
That was pretty tough to add to that. Yeah.
It's like, only thing that came up for me is it was going right along with what TJ was saying, was that sometimes the maladaptive form of the one can do good without goodness. And so it's like doing all the things that are supposedly quote unquote good, but it's missing the heart component. So it's like, I'm going to go help the homeless, but I'm just going to throw this slice of pizza at you. I'm not going to actually say, hey, would you like to eat, and then have a conversation, your humanity. So I think that definitely happens with the maladaptive one. And I think too, somatically, a lot of times there can be really tight tension in the face and the lower jaw structure for type ones, tension in the body for sure, but it's usually kind of a similarity that a lot of ones have. It's a lot of tightness in the jaw, and it's kind of sometimes bridling some of the frustrations, anger, whatever irritations, annoyances, whatever along that line, that words we want to use that kind of are encompassed by the totality of the big emotion of anger.
Are you interested in learning more about our approach to the Enneagram? Go to awareness-to-action.com and check out our certification program. We offer a clear, concise, business-friendly, and science-minded approach while maintaining the depth of traditional approaches to the system. At Awareness to Action International, we're the leading innovators in the theory and pragmatic applications of this system to all aspects of the work environment, including leadership and personal development, team building, diversity and culture, and managing change. However, this approach is not just for the business world. A lot of people who attend our trainings do so for their own self-development or spiritual growth. Our certification program is one of only a handful of curricula accredited as a school by the International Enneagram Association. It is currently being conducted virtually and combines live sessions with asynchronous learning. Again, find out more at awareness-to-action.com.
So I think anger is something really important to keep in mind here, right? And, and so it's funny because, again, I just want to reemphasize that I'm a huge Spike Lee fan, both as a filmmaker and as a human being, right? And I don't mean human, I don't know what he does in his private life or anything like that, but I admire his commitment to causes, right? I mean, I've got great respect for that. And so I'm emphasizing that because I just have a feeling that sometimes I'm going to say things that might be interpreted as criticizing, right? But the guy is angry, right? I mean, and so anger is an emotion of the one, and it's a different kind of anger than we see in the 8, right? The 8's anger is very personalized, right? I'm angry at you because you're a threat to me in some way. People always talk about justice and 8's and that sort of thing. And yes, sort of, okay? It's usually more about vengeance, right? Is that I'm going to, you got me, I got to get you now, right? Is kind of the justice of the 8. But with the 1, it really is about, wait, this is not right, and we need to do something about this. And I think that's all over Spike Lee's work. Mm-hmm.
And something about that, too. With 1s, there's often a denial of one's own anger.
Mm-hmm.
There's a sense of like, I'm not angry, I just want what's right.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, everybody around them can see their shoulders kind of tensing and their jaw kind of bristling. But it's like, I'm not angry. I just need to bring awareness to this really important thing. And why doesn't anybody get it? And there's just no mystery about the fact that they're angry. But it doesn't often fit their inner critic dictate.
Yeah. The other thing is, and you both have touched on this, but just because somebody is a 1 doesn't mean they're automatically a good or noble person, right? There are, like TJ said, meth addicts out there who are 1s and criminals. And I think in Inside Man, we see a bank robber who's probably a type 1, right? And so there are, people out there who are, 1s, but not necessarily good people. And, also we have a tendency to think, oh, well, 1s wouldn't use profanity, right? Because of that. Well, if Spike Lee is a 1, he gives, the lie to that assumption, right? I mean, because Spike loves profanity. Okay. And now I also want to say, I want to touch on the subtypes here for a moment, because yes. I also think that Spike Lee is a transmitting type 1. Now, other Enneagram teachers would refer to that as the sexual or 1-to-1, but I see a whole lot of transmitting sort of energy going on here, not just in Spike Lee himself, but in the movies for sure. Thoughts on that, guys?
Oh, I 110% agree. There's no doubt. There's not a curt way that he like transmits or communicates his anger about a situation or frustration about it. There's not a bridling of it. There's a straightforward, blunt way of getting out and letting people know what he perceives and what his thing is, like what's right and what's wrong based on historical things and all the different things that he adds into his movies. So, oh yeah, most definitely. It's so many avenues when we get into these different movies that definitely transmitting to me. Most definitely.
Yeah. Good. TJ, thoughts on that?
Yeah, agreed. And the 2 points about that. One is that he's incredibly prolific. He's been making movies for 35 years, usually averaging a movie a year or thereabouts. And in addition to that, he's directed many music videos, many TV commercials. He's got his own advertising agency. He's got his own film production company. He runs workshops at low cost for aspiring filmmakers who just don't have the finances or the patience to navigate the bureaucracy of film school. He had his own retail shop for a while. So he's just constantly going. He's usually wearing multiple hats in a given movie. He's, quite often acting in them as well, usually in a supporting role, although in the case of Do the Right Thing, in a lead role. He doesn't consider himself an actor at all. He says he doesn't like it. But when you watch him on screen, he doesn't seem to have any self-consciousness about acting. Same within commercials. Those commercials he did with Michael Jordan, he really looks like he's at home and having a great time. Yeah. So there's that aspect to him. And then another point about that is that a term that came to mind as I was watching his movies, and I watched more than just the four we're going to be talking about, is in your face. His movies are very in your face. And we'll talk about that when we get to the individual movies, but there's this one amazing moment that in Malcolm X where there's this big dance scene, which climaxes with him sliding under a woman's leg and staring right at the camera in a close-up. Like he's saying, "Hello, world, this is me, Spike Lee, talking to you." And that sensibility, I think, permeates his body of work, which is very transmitting. It's like, "Hello, world, this is me. This is what I got. What do you think?"
All excellent points. And there's a lot of calls to wake up. Literally, I saw some little documentary that was showing all the times people yell "wake up" in Spike Lee movies, right? And there's just a whole train of them, right? In Do the Right Thing, it's the Samuel Jackson disc jockey, saying that. And the way Spike dresses in real life, there's a whole lot of transmitting going on there too, right? I mean, we always like to talk about how the transmitters have a bit of a peacock quality to them, right? And Spike's dynamic in his clothes, right? You're not going to see him wearing black polo shirts like I'm wearing here, right? He needs a bit more color in what he's doing. Let's see, the two other points I want to make. Number one, it's important to understand when we come to these instinctual biases, these subtypes around the type 1, a lot of times people think it's the so-called social one that is the one who wants to change the world, right? And I think that's a big misunderstanding. It's actually the transmitting one who wants to change the world, right? These are the Old Testament prophets, right? Of, no, it needs to be this way, it needs to be that way. So it's almost as if they are duplicating their moral vision onto the world by trying to change it. Okay, so it's an important distinction to make. The social, or what I call the navigating one, is actually more flexible and more, able to blend, whereas the preserving one is more rigid around their environment, but not so focused on trying to change the world. Right. So, again, an important distinction that's useful to think about as we go forward. One more point, and then we'll move on to talking about Spike Lee. I talk about the core quality represented at point 1 being objectivity, right? Seeing the world as it is. And one of the challenges that ones face is feeling a stunting of their innate objectivity because they don't feel able to see the world as it is. They start grasping onto rules, okay, and opinions and prejudices and so forth. And that becomes their guiding force. And the growth path of the one is to learn to recognize those as not being objective, but as being, preconceptions, and start becoming more objective in our approach to the world, less emotional about it as we evaluate it. And I think this comes up in Spike Lee's movies all the time, right? There's always this interesting dichotomy between rigidity and real polarized thinking, and then this acknowledgement of the ambiguous, right? The contrasting of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr., for example, right? The yin and the yang of the civil rights movement. Not ultimately, but in the height of it, there was this polarity there, and there's a lot of that, right? On the one hand, there's this black and white thinking, literally and figuratively, and then there's this, but things are more complicated than that, which I always think is wonderful in these movies. Thoughts on those things, guys?
Yeah, I think he articulates it very well, and I think that lends into him being a one, is the fact he can literally articulate generally what society says is a specific side of an issue. He can just voice it very well, but at the same time, bringing it to the head, like on every single movie where it's like, yeah, I mean, and like he does such a good job. Like if you were just watching like one of his movies and didn't really understand and hadn't had knowledge prior to about the whole situation, you would be listening and be like, yeah, they're right. I agree. That is true. That is right. And parts of it is definitely true, but he does a wonderful job of bringing in the other side as well. And then obviously getting it to where like, wait, there's way more than here. There's some law of three going on here. There's not just duality and binary thinking here. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. Great. Yeah. Okay. I won't jump ahead. There's so much to talk about here that I won't jump ahead on it. But TJ, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, it gets me wondering if perhaps this is why he is sometimes typed as a 6. Whenever I've seen his name come up on lists of like famous people who were the different types, I can't remember exactly who said it. Probably Russ Hudson, the Enneagram Institute, on one of their lists, but it was as a 6, but nothing backing it up. And this was the first time I really took a deep dive into his body of work as well as who he is. Read a book of interviews with him, watched an extended interview with Charlie Rose and all that. And he does do that. Yeah, you would think stereotypically a 1 would make movies that were polemics every single time. A movie where it is inescapable at the end what the conclusion is. And that's not necessarily what he does. And, we'll get to that when we talk about Do the Right Thing. He really does look at multiple points of view and doesn't necessarily say, and therefore that is why we must do blank.
Yeah, so I was actually speaking with Russ about this, and Russ said he can see Spike Lee as a 1, and I think I might have seen a list like that as well. And TJ, when we talked about Martin Scorsese and Type 6 last time with Russ, we were talking about this idea of doubt, right? And there's not doubt. There's not a drop of doubt in Spike Lee, right? I don't know if you guys got a chance to see the Charlie Rose interview with him that I sent to you, but this is a guy who knows who he is and what he thinks and does not question himself. I mean, there's just no uncertainty. It's almost 8-ish, right? I mean, it could be easy if you didn't understand the transmitting version of the 1 to confuse Spike Lee as an 8, I think, when you watch interviews with him, right? Because there is this groundedness, right, which you don't see in 6, right? His characters, the Mookie character, the Michael Jordan commercials with, I forget the character's name in that, there is that kind of thing. But Spike in real life, no, there's no fidgety 6-ness, that we often see. I'm pretty sure he's a 1, and for sure, the 1 theme is throughout the movies that we see. I mean, come on, we're going to talk about a movie called Do the Right Thing. I mean, come on, right? I mean, do we need to talk further on this topic? Right? Yes.
Just a quote that I found from an interview. He said, "I've never lacked confidence, just money."
Ooh.
Yeah. So let me give a quick bio of Spike Lee, and then we'll start talking about the movies. Okay. So real name Shelton Jackson Lee. I got started calling Spike because, as a kid, because people found him to be kind of ornery, a bit prickly. Born March 20th, 1957, American filmmaker, film director, producer, screenwriter, actor, and professor. His production company, 40 Acres and a Mule, Filmworks, getting back to that idea of justice, for anybody listening who doesn't know the origin of that term, it was what was promised to freed slaves after the Civil War by the U.S. government and later went back on. And so Spike is making a point to not let us forget that, folks owe us 40 acres and a mule still, right? And, and I'm going to get mine, okay? Let's see, has produced more than 35 films since 1983. Made his directorial debut with She's Gotta Have It, 1986. Has since written and directed such films as Do the Right Thing, Mo Better Blues, Jungle Fever, Malcolm X, Crooklyn, Clockers, 25th Hours. By the way, Clockers and 25th Hour, both great movies. Unfortunately, we couldn't fit them in here, but super movie. 25th Hour is probably the first and best post 9/11 movie, right? Meaning that
9/11 was a character in the background, in a sense, right? A super, super movie. Inside Man, which we'll talk about, Chirac, Black Klansman, and Da 5 Bloods, which I think is his most recent film other than documentaries and such, has also acted in 10 of his films. His work has continually explored race relations, colorism in the Black community, the role of media in contemporary life, urban crime and poverty, and other political issues. He's won numerous accolades for his work, including an Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay, a Student Academy Award, BAFTA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. By the way, that he did not win the Academy Award for Malcolm X, and that Denzel Washington did not win the Best Actor Award are almost criminal slights. Let's see, his films, Do the Right Thing, Malcolm X, Four Little Girls, about the bombing of the church in Birmingham, Alabama, and She's Gotta Have It, were each selected by the Library of Congress for preservation in the National Film Registry for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Okay, so a serious filmmaker who has a tremendous body of work. Uneven, right? There are some Spike Lee movies that didn't work from my perspective. I think Bamboozled, for example, is one that I found a bit painful to watch for multiple reasons, but huge talent. Any other thoughts on Spike Lee's, guys, before we move to talking about Do the Right Thing?
Yeah, one thing that comes up for me is that it's not something that is necessarily widely known, but he has been very consistent in making sure that there's a lot of Black people behind the scenes in his movie as well as in front of the camera. And he went toe-to-toe with the Teamsters Union to increase Black membership. And he said at the time, the New York Teamsters had maybe 5 or 6 Black people. And he threatened not to use them. So that's no small thing. And he said, in his movies, he would always insist that a Black person design the poster for the film. Like, he was able to do this, and he was very critical of Eddie Murphy for not doing the same, saying Eddie Murphy built Paramount. He could have got whatever he wanted if he asked, and claimed that he couldn't. So he's very consistent in making sure, like, this is important. And he's also said that part of the reason that there's so few films made by filmmakers of color is the fact that there's very few, or at the time when he was starting, no Black executives. So these are the people in the decision-making positions. So he's long been a champion of, like, let's have Black people at every level.
Are you interested in learning more about our approach to the Enneagram? Go to awareness-to-action.com and check out our certification program. We offer a clear, concise, business-friendly, and science-minded approach while maintaining the depth of traditional approaches to the system. At Awareness to Action International, we're the leading innovators in the theory and pragmatic applications of this system to all aspects of the work environment, including leadership and personal development, team building, diversity and culture, and managing change. However, this approach is not just for the business world. A lot of people who attend our trainings do so for their own self-development or spiritual growth. Our certification program is one of only a handful of curricula accredited as a school by the International Enneagram Association. It is currently being conducted virtually and combines live sessions with asynchronous learning. Again, find out more at awareness-to-action.com.
First movie we're going to talk about here is Do the Right Thing, 1989. TJ, tell us about Do the Right Thing.
Yeah, so the summary of what Do the Right Thing is about, and this is going to be full of spoilers, as our summaries always are. So Do the Right Thing is the story of what happens on one block of Brooklyn on the hottest day of summer in 1989. It's an ensemble film. It's got a really wide-ranging cast. So the lead character is Mookie, played by Spike Lee, who's a pizza delivery guy for Sal's Famous Pizzeria, or as the pizzeria owner refers to it, Pizzeria. It's a pronunciation of the word I'd never encountered before. And that Sal is played by Danny Aiello. So Mookie has a girlfriend played by Rosie Perez. That was her feature film debut, and a son, and he doesn't live with either of them. Kind of an absentee dad, although he's not entirely gone from their lives. The various other characters include Mr. Senior Love Daddy, a radio DJ played by Samuel L. Jackson, who broadcasts all day. There's Smiley, played by Roger Guinevere Smith, who's a man with cerebral palsy who walks around selling pictures of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X together. There's Radio Raheem, played by Bill Nunn, who walks around carrying a huge boombox, usually playing Public Enemy's song Fight the Power, which was written for this movie. At Spike Lee's request, there's Da Mayor, played by Ozzie Davis, who's an old man in the neighborhood, kind of a drunk and ne'er-do-well, but with a strong moral sense. There's an older woman, Sister Mother, played by Ruby Dee, who DeMayer is trying to woo, and the actual actors were married in real life.
Yes.
There's Buggin' Out, played by Giancarlo Esposito, who's kind of an activist, who I'm sure we'll talk about more, who objects to there being no pictures of African Americans on the pizzeria's wall of fame, even though all their customers are black. And there's various other characters. There's a bunch of characters. Most of them are hanging around on stoops or, in front of walls or walking up and down the street. So all the tensions.
I'm going to interrupt you here for just a second, because someday I want to watch a movie that's just focused on ML, Coconut Sid, and Sweet Dick Willie. I would watch that movie all day long with those guys. I mean, just every time they were on screen, I started salivating.
And all of their dialogue was improvised.
Oh, was it really? Oh, see, that's even better. I didn't know that. That's even better. I want to hang out with those guys.
They're kind of the Greek chorus of the film in some way.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So the tensions on that very hot day come to a head when Buggin' Out and Radio Raheem walk into the pizzeria at the end of the day, playing loud music and insisting on more African American representation on the Wall of Fame. And they finally push Sal far enough that his buried racism comes out, and he smashes Radio Raheem's boombox with a baseball bat, which leads to a fight, which spills out into the street, which draws the cops. And the cops choke Radio Raheem to death, which leads to a standoff of people in the neighborhood, which Mookie breaks by smashing the window of the pizzeria with a garbage can. And the crowd storms into the pizzeria and trashes it and burns it to the ground. So that is Do the Right Thing, which also ignited a big storm the year it came out. It was nominated for a bunch of Oscars, didn't win any. And Spike Lee was a very vocal critic of the movie that did win Best Picture that year, which was Driving Miss Daisy, which showed Morgan Freeman as a gentle servant of an old white lady. And that's a movie that has not survived in public estimation in the slightest. It's never referenced anymore at all, except in this exact context. Whereas Do the Right Thing has only grown in critical and public appraisal.
There's a great song, Burn Hollywood Burn by Public Enemy, on the same album that Fight the Power is on, where they talk about, come on, we'll get together, let's go to the movies, and they sit down and the movie playing is Driving Miss Daisy, right? And they just like, get out of here, and they get up and they go, So anyway, forgot all about that. All right. Let me ask you, Milton. So this movie was made the year you were born, so I'm assuming you did not see it in the theater. Had you seen it prior
in the stomach, yeah.
Right. Had you seen it prior to watching it for the podcast?
Bits and pieces.
Bits and pieces, okay.
I'd seen bits and pieces prior to. I hadn't seen the whole thing. Heard about it, heard people talk about it, my family members and different things, but I hadn't sat down and watched the whole thing.
Tell me about your reaction to it, okay? And we haven't mentioned this yet, but Milton is a black man, so you're going to bring a different perspective to it than as a young black man than me as an old white man. So, give me, if you would, please, your reaction to it in general.
It was I definitely felt it like in a way that was serious to the humanity of like literally now. The way that I felt it in my body, the way that I understood the characters. So when you were talking about like being able to like watch a whole movie of the three characters, just like cracking jokes, constantly doing things. I have experienced that. Like I have family members that have done that and part of different things in neighborhoods. So like I've experienced and seen that exact combination of people. One person, he is hilarious, makes no sense at all to a certain degree, and just loving, just a lover of pleasure, right? We have somebody who he's thoughtful, like he has deep thoughts, but like he ain't doing nothing, And then you have somebody who's like kind of in between, where it's like, well, I'm looking at that, but ooh, she do look good. So just that balance and that combination. So I felt such a connection to the movie because I think it was a really good depiction of like some of the variants in black like neighborhoods and cultures where you have young kids who may like show up and be like joking, saying something stupid, trying to talk about somebody. But then too, you have the drunkard or some places, the neighborhood crackhead sometimes, that's what it is, where they actually have morals. Like they ended up this way because of who knows what happened to them, but they actually have morals, even though they have these big struggles. So I identified with it quite deeply. And I was like, this is a realistic depiction, of what was going on. And then it's from the past a little bit more than when I was born. So some of it's like, okay, I connect to that. And I've seen pictures of my, relatives in this exact same form. So, and I've heard stories. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because it takes place in Bedford-Stuyvesant, a section of Brooklyn that at the time was not, the best place in the world, right? I mean, it was a very low income and dangerous neighborhood. Mike Tyson famously was from that neighborhood. Of course, Sweet Dick Willie would have kicked Mike Tyson's ass, as he, made it very clear. But it was a rough place, and they had, some challenges during the filmmaking, as I recall. They really cleaned it up a lot. You go to Bedford-Stuyvesant now, it is a different place, right? It is gentrified, and, it's not the place it used to be. So the other thing that was interesting, especially since we're talking about the Enneagram, which is inherently about different types of personalities and learning to understand ourselves and learning to get other people's perspectives, there are a lot of different kinds of people here, right? You have the Korean grocers, you have the white Italian-American pizza guy and his sons, and, one of whom is, a bit more sensitive, and the other one who is clearly a racist. And there's also the Hispanic group, and there are various shades of skin color within the Black community, which I mentioned in the biography is an issue that comes up in the Black community, right? There are kind of distinctions made based on skin color. Am I right there, Milton?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, most definitely.
All right. I don't know. Let me ask you guys, what to you, besides the title, felt one-ish about this movie?
Well, I'm happy to jump in.
Go ahead, TJ.
Just to build on something I said before, just the in-your-face nature of the movie starts from the first second. So the opening credits, which takes a number of minutes, because I think we hear the full song of Fight the Power, which I mentioned was written for this. And Fight the Power, there's a moral imperative right in the title, much less about the song. And then what we're watching as the song is playing is Rosie Perez dancing. And she's wearing boxing gloves. And her outfit changes and the lighting changes, but it's bright, it's vivid, it grabs you by the ears and says, hello, look at this. It's really in your face.
Yeah.
And then there's a pretty famous sequence midway through the movie where a bunch of different characters just go on a racist diatribe about a given ethnic group. And they're looking right at the camera, and the camera is zooming in as they spell out this invective, one horrific term after another about Black people, about Italians, about Koreans, about Jews, about Puerto Ricans, et cetera, until finally we cut to the DJ, played by Samuel L. Jackson, just screaming, hey, it is time to chill out. So, there's that, first of all, there's just this big, boom, everybody's got strong opinions. And that's consistent throughout the movie. Most characters in this environment are not mellow and just going with the flow. Everyone has some axe to grind, whether it's about how these Koreans moved into our neighborhood, a year after they got off the boat, they're running this successful business, and why aren't we doing that? Or, this is our stoop, so we're going to play the music we like. No, Radio Raheem's got his louder boombox. We're going to play the music he likes. Or there's John Savage is the guy coming in wearing a Larry Bird jersey, and he's the representation of gentrification. And Bug-N-Out's not happy about that, and he's not being quiet about that. And furthermore, he stepped on Bug-N-Out's Air Jordans and left a stain on them. So, everybody's got something. And Pino, the son of Sal, who's played by John Turturro, like you mentioned, is pretty blatantly racist. So he's got his thing to do. And then Tina, Mookie's girlfriend, is on him for being an absent father and for not being an attentive boyfriend. And her mother is the same way when he comes to visit. She's yelling. Everybody's yelling at everybody else. Everybody's got a strong desire of the way things should be, and they're not afraid to say it.
Milton, what was one-ish about this movie for you?
Everything. But I think one of the moments that I think of one is, first of all, even just jumping to the end real quick, how it ends literally gives you like the moral of what we should be thinking about and doing, like how, like to look at like dealing with things when it comes to violence and how to actually solve problems and issues. Like that right there was like, he gives you at the very end, it's like, let me go ahead and spell this out for you. So you all make sure you don't miss this message. Right?
In case you didn't get it. For the stupid people in the back.
Right.
And what Spike Lee does, he puts quotes, one from Martin Luther King and one from Malcolm X at the end. So go ahead.
Very much so. And then I think even the way that he displayed his outrage of anger was one-ish. So he's frustrated, upset, infuriated, starts it, but then goes and sits down. Like he basically is kind of the catalyst to start what eventually turns into the riot and everything, from throwing the chair into the glass. And then he like sits down, like he expresses it hardcore, then he's like frustrated, goes sit down. Like there's no rampaging, ravaging type of, just like, I'm going to express this right here. I'm going to throw this right here, and this is going to break loose everything. So I feel like that was kind of one-ish type of anger being expressed, because it was like, okay, I did that, and I'm gonna go sit down. This is crazy. People not doing what they're supposed to do. I'm tired of this. Like, this is ridiculous. That was another thing. And then I think there were even parts of his character as Mookie. There was like, and it's because Spike Lee is a one, there was aspects of how he even encountered people and talked with them and critiqued certain things about all these different things. So even when the neighborhood drunkard, I can't remember his name right now.
The mayor.
Yeah, the mayor. What can I remember? The mayor. So when I think the cop was talking to him, trying to frame him about something and trying to look bad, Mookie stepped in and was like, this man didn't do anything. Like he was trying to do the right thing, blah, 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 and moved him out the way. Like there was this responsibility that Mookie kind of felt, which I think is also definitely one-ish, where they feel a certain responsibility for things. And I felt like Mookie felt a weight on him. At the same time, he had his own flaws. He's human, but like there was a weight on him of responsibility. I got to make money so that I can make sure that my kid have money, even though I'm not necessarily always there. I got to do this. It's like, it felt like he felt responsible for so many different things that weren't necessarily always his thing necessarily. And then the other thing that came up to me that was very one-ish, it was just so many critiques. He throws it in. Like I wrote down a list of things he was critiquing. Like the Jehovah Witness, when they came back, like there was critiques of that when he came back. Like climate change. Oh my goodness. Like I was like, like this is 1989. I mean, come on now. Like okay. Climate change, businesses in black neighborhoods, scruffing up shoes, like how serious it is. Like when you like scuff up like a black man's shoes, like just how serious and how like outrageous seriously it gets. The whole neighborhood got involved, which is crazy. Yeah. Then over policing black neighborhoods, different types of black people that you see, power of major critiques of race from just all different angles. So there was just so many critiques of society I saw. Like I just got a list full, but yeah, that's a part of the one.
Great. And all of this in a movie that just made me laugh throughout, right? And that was visually spectacular. I mean, just really, really creative and interesting, and sort of established some of the Spike Lee visual themes that we'll see throughout, much of his movies were kind of first put in here. And he uses that, TJ, you mentioned before regarding Malcolm X, that in-your-face camera shot. But Spike Lee is really the master of the kind of tilted angle close-up. Right. And there's a lot of this with Radio Raheem, where it would be this zooming in close up with the camera tilted just a bit. So that, again, it's both in your face and disorienting at the same time, throwing you off balance a little bit. And again, so that you can't look away. Right. This is the genius, I think, of this movie, that you can't look away. You can't, for me at least, some people are put off by the profanity and, some other things and might not watch it, but I couldn't take my eyes off it. I think that Spike Lee does that, very consciously of, you will sit there, to your point, it starts off with, you're going to sit here and watch this, right? Because you can't look away from Rosie Perez Dancing, and you can't stop listening to the lyrics of Fight the Power, and I will not let go of you until the end of the movie, right? Till you've heard the message. I was watching an interview with Spike Lee, with Charlie Rose, and he said that white people always ask him, why did Mookie throw the trash can through the window? And he said, but a black man has never asked me that question, which I found interesting. Okay. So yeah. I'm going to take advantage here. Milton. Now, look, I get it. I don't ask the question of why he did that, right? I'm curious about your reaction to that scene of the trash can through the window.
Yeah. So a big part of it, there's so much buried trauma, anger, frustration that is just, it's not really vented or talked about, in societies of color, especially. It's getting better, but especially now, like going to a therapist, a counselor, first of all, it wasn't really available to Black people. And then on top of that, there were times where people were actually trying to do bad things to Black people in counseling, trying to, do things. And so take advantage of Black communities. So there's a bad stigma to it. And so not having someone to truly be able to speak through these things, to express these things, and your societal environment has created so many things that are frustrating, that are belittling, that are degrading, and all the laws and everything's really against you. And then if you do something about it, then a police come knock you up your head or kill you. So it was just this balance. So it's just like deep holding of anger in the body. And I think it's for all Black people who've experienced living in American society for the most part, but especially even looking at Spike Lee's character as a one and him as a one, it's like, I'm so sick and tired of this. And it's coming out. And so there's going to always be an expression of anger. It's going to come out one way or the other. Right. And throughout the whole movie, you really don't see Mookie express that really. It's really kind of held.
Yeah.
And just moved on to something else. Give me my money. You know what I'm saying? Just it's moved on to something else, but it's there and it's deep down. So that's what I would say. I definitely didn't I was like, I get it.
Right.
I get it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Milton. TJ, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah. Shortly before that scene, right as the pizzeria is closed up, but then Sal lets in a few more customers, he has a conversation with his two sons and Mookie, saying he's decided to name the pizzeria Sal and Sons Famous Pizzeria. And then says, and Mookie, there will always be a place for you here because you've been like a son to me. And even though this is well-intentioned, what's very blatantly being communicated is you're a second-class citizen in this equation. My sons get to have the place named after them and will inherit it. Mookie, you will just be a salaried employee who will always have to argue for your pay. Even though I'm giving lip service to that, I'm saying maybe the most generous, loving thing on the surface is you've been like a son to me. There will always be a place for you here. It's actually kind of empty. And Mookie's just barely getting by. They mentioned his salary, which is $250 a week. So obviously the cost of living was less then than it is now. But that's not much. And that doesn't sound like too great of a future.
Yeah. No, even in 1989 dollars, that's not a lot of money. So, so, yeah, you're right. And it's interesting too. And again, this is where it does so well with ambiguity, right? He steps back from that black and white space and then deals with ambiguity so well, because after that expression of the rage that Milton was talking about, there is this release almost. And then the next day, Mookie goes back to, number one, get paid, but there's almost this tender moment between. It's almost after they yell at each other and Sal throws the money at him, but there's also, this feeling of, okay, we've let it out. We're sort of okay now, in a sense, right? But it was a weird sort of release to me that felt very human, okay, rather than polemic in that sense. I was fascinated by that. I also want to give a shout out here to Buggin' Out, played by Giancarlo Esposito, as TJ mentioned, who is also Gus Frings in Breaking Bad. Okay, the drug dealer, Gus, who the owner of El Pollo Loco, who is a very one-ish character in Breaking Bad. I mean, if you have not seen it, he is, the sort of methodical, rigid, neat and tidy and orderly drug dealer. So again, there's that theme, and what bugging out, again, probably not enough to establish him clearly as an Enneagram type, but there's a whole lot of one stuff going on there, right? It was, wait a minute, why are these white people on the wall? Where are the brothers, right? So, which sort of sets off events, this need for justice and fairness.
And he's trying to organize a boycott.
Yes.
It's not just something he says idly, then he does something with it, and he walks around trying to get people on board, which of course most people don't want to have anything to do with. But he won't let this go. And yeah, that precipitates the climax of the movie of him storming back in, demanding justice.
Yeah, great. All right. Final thoughts from you guys on Do the Right Thing before we move to the next movie.
I think it was an incredible movie for sure. And I think what you were saying about like how Spike uses the camera to be face up, like I think, well, I kind of feel like I know, he purposely wants to make people feel uncomfortable so that people actually take action and do the right thing. I really appreciate the way that he did it, but it also, like you said, when you had your son actually watch it last year and be like, dang, the same stuff is happening literally like now. So, hopefully I think we're making strides, to shifts and changes. But it's a great movie to make sure that people are still seeing and bringing it back so that people can be like, yeah, this has always been here.
Yeah.
This is not new.
Right. That's the key of it. I mean, it really was. I mean, the fact that the police killed Radio Raheem with a chokehold using, a police baton, it's like, come on, what have we learned here? And so, yeah, I look, for anybody listening who has not seen Do the Right Thing, I'm going to say this. I was debating whether or not to say this. And I was watching this movie. I'm thinking to myself, what movie does this make me think of? And the movie that kept popping into my mind was Citizen Kane. And I'll tell you why. Okay, young director, a prodigy in a sense, right? Making a movie with a message, but with riveting camera angles and creativity in the visuals, right? And so, and I was thinking that, and I'm thinking, all right, let's not get carried away here, right? But I keep coming back to that analogy of where this movie should be on the pantheon of movies. I think it's one of those movies that everybody should see, like a Citizen Kane and a number of other movies. But I don't know. Am I going too far there, TJ? You're a movie buff.
Well, another thing it has in common is that it's told from a number of perspectives. And in the credits to Citizen Kane, it's not a scroll, it's a bunch of titles. Orson Welles shares his screen credit because everybody else gets an individual credit, but he shares his screen credit with the cinematographer, Greg Toland. And you mentioned the cinematography in this movie. Ernest Dickerson and Spike Lee became friends in film school. They were both at NYU together, and they worked together on Spike's first handful of films before Ernest Dickerson became a filmmaker in his own right. And that's something I really noticed watching this movie, is how incredible the camera work is, how incredible the design is, just the cinematography in general. There's a documentary I've mentioned in a few of these episodes, which was a real game changer for me, called Visions of Light, The Art of Cinematography. It's about cinematography. That doc opens with a quote from Ernest Dickerson and includes scenes from Do the Right Thing. It includes something like the fact that they painted the wall behind the three men red to accentuate that, the feeling of it being the hottest day of summer. And then watching some later Spike Lee movies, including Get on the Bus or Bamboozled, the photography just doesn't look that great. Some of it was filmed with digital cameras. It's just not quite as sharp. It's not as beautiful. Whereas something to appreciate, just entirely apart from everything else we've talked about, is the incredible visual richness of Do the Right Thing and Malcolm X.
Yeah.
And then just to build on something that both of you have mentioned before, police killing black men. That wasn't something people were talking about in 1989. Global warming, very few people were talking about that. And then gentrification. It's only dealt with in one scene in this movie, but Mario, as you mentioned, Brooklyn wasn't considered a nice or desirable place at the time. And yet gentrification was beginning, and Spike Lee was talking about it. So he was ahead of the curve with a lot of these things. A lot of people were aware of these things. Not so many people were talking about them. And he was. and talking about them fearlessly and saying, these are conversations we need to have. And, I read a quote from an interview where he said that's kind of what he's going for with his entire body of work, is not saying, here's the solution to the problem, but saying, this is a problem. We need to talk about this. And even though the major theme of Do the Right Thing is racism, there's these other things too, like global warming is important. Gentrification is important. Police violence against Black people is very important. And of course, that's part of racism.
Two other final points I want to make before we move on, because I can't talk enough about this movie. Number one, I want to point out the music, the use of music. The score was done by his father. Is Billy? Billy, yes, thank you. And featured the saxophone player, Branford Marsalis, brother of Wynton Marsalis. And so there's this lovely, I'll call it lovely, soprano saxophone throughout the movie. I mean, it's kind of a harsh, at the same time, but a really good use of music in all of Spike Lee's movies that we're going to talk about. I think he really has a knack for that. And of course, the great song Fight the Power by Public Enemy. So is featured throughout. So do the right thing and go watch Do the Right Thing. You've been listening to the Enneagram in a Movie podcast, which is produced and edited by Seth Creekmore and is part of the Awareness to Action podcast network. Don't forget to go online and support the podcast by taking a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. See you next time.